Hello everyone, how's it going? A couple of weeks ago in youth we talked about living dead. We talked about how you die to yourself, you die to sin, and you live for Christ. You can't do one without the other. You can't not die to sin and live for Christ. You can't live for Christ and not die to self. You have to die to yourself. His will has to be first. You have to die to sin because you crucified it with Christ. And then finally, you have to live for Jesus. I wanted to read this passage that I read the other day, Ezekiel. It's talking about the nations of Judah and Israel. And they had done some things that were, well, questionable to say the least. God says they are sisters. And I'm not going to give you the names because I'd probably mispronounce them anyways. But it says, your sisters sent messengers to distant lands to get men. Then when they arrived, you bathed yourselves, painted your eyelids, and put on your finest jewels for them. You sat with them on a beautifully embroidered couch and put my incense and my special oil on a table that was spread before you. From your room came the sound of many men carousing. They were lustful men and drunkards from the wilderness, who put bracelets on your wrist and beautiful crowns on your head. So that was verses 40 through 42, and I'm going to jump down to verse 45. But righteous people will judge these sister cities for what they are, adulterers and murderers. You know, they had cheated on God. And the key here, when I was reading, I said, you could feel the emotion. It said, you sat with them, these other nations, not God, these other nations. You sat with them on a beautifully embroidered couch and put my incense and my special oil on a table that was spread for you. These things that I gave you this oil. I gave you this so that you could give it to me. You know, so many times God gives us things. And we take them and we're like, yeah, I got this. But we fail to give it back to him. You know, it's what we do when we don't tithe. It's what we do when we're in a worship setting and we're not worshiping. So I wanted to read the other verse this made me think of. And so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all he has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him. So he talks about Israel and Judah and Ezekiel, and he says, they've abandoned me. Not only have they abandoned me, they've also brought in people from outside. They've brought in men from other nations, gods from other areas, and the things that I gave them to give to me, the oil, the incense, what have they done? They've given it to them. The things I gave them, my oil, my incense, and they gave it to someone else. So we read this in Romans 12, and it says, let them be a living and holy sacrifice. This life that God has given you, what are you doing with it? Are you giving it to something else? Are you giving it to something that matters more to you? Or are you giving it to God?